All right, welcome back. You're watching Good Morning Nigeria. Let's kickstart our conversation for today, which is on the resumption of international flights, scheduled to have started rescheduled to start on September 5. Let's take this report put together by Uyemi Ajayi.
The prevalence of coronavirus pandemic globally ushered in a new norm, with many activities changing and some put on hold. One of such was the restriction of movement of people in order to curb the spread of the virus. Then, domestic and international flights were suspended in countries including Nigeria. This has led to airlines being grounded and many workers losing their jobs due to inability to pay salaries. Though flights on essential activities were meticulously allowed in the airspace, but seriously monitored aside the continuous evacuation of stranded Nigerians abroad, which were carried out in batches. However, after a series of COVID-19 preventive measures put in place by the government, domestic flight operations were allowed to commence in early July, and this was to ease the COVID-19 lockdown to allow ease movement across the states. The flights resumed at the Nnamdi Azikiwe International Airport in the capital Abuja and Murtala Mohammed Domestic Terminal in the commercial city of Lagos. However, it was a welcome development to many. Recently, at the Presidential Task Force on COVID-19 briefing that international flights will resume on the 5th of September 2020 after a week shift from the initial August 29th date to fine-tune protocol and guidelines. This means that international travelers must test negative for COVID-19 before departure abroad and will pay for another test to be conducted 1 week after arriving in the country. In addition to the development, the domestic passenger service charge is set to increase from 1,000 naira to 2,000 naira, while ECOWAS regional service charge is now $80 from $50. The continental passenger service charge is now $100 as compared to the initial $50, and these will commence from 1st of September. The Federal Airports Authority of Nigeria FAN says this increment became necessary due to inflation. Now, as the airspace will soon get busy, won't this increase the number of new cases in the country, knowing well that it was through that means that Nigeria recorded its index case? Now that international flights are going to resume, will this lead to the calling back of those sacked workers? Well, with these questions, guests on NTA's Good Morning Nigeria will be discussing shortly.
All right, thank you very much, Uyemi Ajayi, for that background up. Now, this morning we're expecting the Director General of the Nigerian Civil Aviation Authority, NCAA, that's Captain Musa Nuhu, to join us via Skype from Lagos. We're still trying to get the connections sorted out. But once we have him, of course, he will join in the conversation. In the meantime, we have with us here an aviation analyst, Godi Ike. Ike, delighted to have you with us on the program this morning.
Oh, thank you, Kingsley. Good morning.
Okay. Good morning. Good to have you, Godi. So let's shoot ahead. First of all, was this shift expected?
One can safely say yes. Yes. The whole thing that is required for this flight to take place is quite complex, and one is never sure of not just being complex. It comes from different departments. It's not purely an aviation thing. You've got the those that are monitoring the pandemic and giving out information about activities, and who are setting the protocols that should be observed, and who want to ensure that in all this that will keep the health of the nation. And so if for you to really harmonize all the parties and and have things going smoothly, it's not an easy task. So I I expected and suspected that they might not meet up the date of 29th. And as a matter of fact, the date of 5th is still hanging in the balance, if you ask me. And by the way, also realize that the business that's going on now is a business of what you give to us, we give back to you, the business of reciprocity. If a nation, negotiates too hard for us to accept, it means that we can't exchange visits with those, that kind of nation. So nations must agree and harmonize their positions before flights can take place. So it's quite complex.
Give us a sense of that complexity.
Yes.
Yes, of flight resumptions amidst a situation such as we have at hand.
First of all, as a standard practice, in the aviation sector, you have what is known as BASA, the Bilateral Air Services Agreement. That document is, what ties the relationship amongst countries. For instance, if Nigeria wants to begin flight operations with, say, United Kingdom, assuming we didn't have one, and want to, begin one. First of all, is that the, representatives of the two nations must meet and discuss what you can do on both sides. What you
in terms of scheduling,
instead of flight scheduling, instead of number of touchdowns that you can do, in terms of what you can do, locally. Can you land at point A within the same country and then leave the point A to another point B within? Those kind of negotiations, so you must agree on them. And then that's what's captured in the BASA, the Bilateral Air Services Agreement. And then once that is set and both parties are comfortable with the agreement, then that's when you say that you can fly into that country and vice versa, and they can also fly into this, and of course everybody is expected to obey the rules as set out by BASA. Now, the corona pandemic brought a new dimension, and that is every nation of the world is doing everything it can to keep its own citizens safe and alive. And so rules are made, what you can do and what you cannot do, medically speaking. Now, you find a situation where some countries do not take as seriously as others do of what's going on. Some countries, for instance, in some countries, they insist that you must have your, I'm just giving an example, face mask. And in others, even within the same country, for instance, in America, generally it's said that it's safer to have your mask on, but some states say they can't impose them. That the people can, if you want to wear for your safety, fine. If you don't want to wear, you have your freedom to choose what you want to do.
And they are seeing the consequences.
That's correct.
Spiking numbers of infections and fatalities.
Wonderful. Now, bring it now to what we're discussing. If you want to travel now from, or rather, America wants to travel to Nigeria, and the state where that airline operates from is one of the reckless states that says, we don't care about this mask stuff and some of the protocols set out. It's a free society. If you think it's good for you, use them. If you think it's not good for you, you are free to not to. And then Nigeria happens to be a country that says, listen, it's compulsory. You must have it. You must operate, in this fashion if you must visit us. Now, can you imagine now you have an airline that's had a relationship with Nigeria that's been flying in and out, and we've been flying in and out, and it happens to be such a state that is reckless. What do you think those that are managing our situation we do. Would they allow flights from that kind of state? The answer is definitely no.
Well, go to UK.
Yeah.
Just before we return again to the specifics of resumption of regular international flights, even on a limited scale, what do we know about the global picture of the resumption of international flights? Because we do know that even with the widespread lockdown, there were still cargo flights.
Yes.
There were still emergency flights.
Correct.
But in terms of passenger traffic, virtually a no-no.
That's right.
Across international airspace. What is the situation now? Are countries allowing flights in and out? What do we know in Europe, in Asia, and the Americas?
That's not a standard practice anywhere now in the world. It's, some countries are saying at the moment, we can't allow certain listed countries to come in, because they believe that those countries are not doing enough, to curb the the effects of the pandemic. And Nigeria, for instance, is saying it's purely a business of reciprocity. If you don't want us, we don't want you. That's the attitude, for instance, in Nigeria. And so the situation is quite tricky and quite complex. What I see is that constant negotiations we continue. And then, of course, nations of the world will weigh what's happening to their economy as against what's happening to the health of the people. And at any point in time, you think that the need to have the economy running is now running higher than the issue of health. Then you begin to consider, for instance, again, if you have a nation that's been reckoning so much money by relating with Nigeria, coming in here to take what we have in terms of raw materials and then and all that stuff, and then and they have this attitude that we are not doing enough. I'm not saying we're not doing enough, but I'm just saying, for instance, if they have that attitude that we're not doing enough, and therefore they won't let us come, fly into their territory. And then with the principle we already have put out there, the government of Nigeria is not pretending about it. The Honorable Minister of Aviation, Hadi Sirika, has made it clear to the world that our business is business of reciprocity. If you want us, we want you. If you don't want us, we don't want you.
Yes. I'm slightly unclear about the underpinning rationale for our official policy and the resumption of limited international flights. Is it being taken as largely, say, an aviation matter? To say, yes, if you don't allow us to fly into your country, we will not allow you to fly into our country. That's aviation. Or is the overriding consideration one of public health? Assuming I don't think we have direct flights now between Nigeria and Brazil. In the past, there was Varig Airlines that you could fly directly from Lagos to Rio.
Yes.
But if you look at the horrendous numbers coming out of Brazil, in terms of the caseload of infections and even fatalities arising from the infections, if Brazil were to say, and assuming we had direct air linkages with Brazil says, no, we will allow you to fly in. Are we also going to say, Brazil, you can also fly in?
Very, very smart one, Kenneth. Very, very smart one that you just raised there. But let me also tell you what I know and that what I see is as the way this is working at the moment. If you notice, there's no time the aviation ministry, that is to say minister and his directors, come out as purely aviation to address issues. If you notice, all the time, the addressing the world and addressing Nigerians happens during the briefing of the
PTF.
The PTF. led by the
Secretary of the Government of the Federation.
That's correct. And of course, the people who are in charge of the health in, the NCDC, yes, the NCDC. Now, you would notice that at all times, the different sectors of, and especially aviation, it's on that platform that you get information. What does that tell you? It tells you that the aviation department cannot exclude itself from the system and then go solo and say, okay, we're happy with these individuals, they're allowing us in, so we can allow them in. No. There again, you would observe that the aviation side was actually ready for flight to resume tomorrow, 29th. But on the medical side, they made it clear that they were not ready. There were a few things they wanted to be sure that they are in place before they let this in. So that answers your question. It's not purely a decision that's going to be made by aviation versus aviation. The medical sector of the PTF would be sure that there is safety in the system before those kind of flights will be allowed.
I understand. I mean, your response is solid, but I was just wondering, as I was trying to get us to interrogate the nature of the reciprocity. I mean, in international relations, reciprocity is clear. If you allow us to fly in, we will also allow you to fly in. What do we know today about Italy? I wouldn't know whether Alitalia still flies into Lagos. What do we know about Italy, one of the heavily impacted countries? What do we know about Spain, one of the heavily impacted countries? Is it Sabina, or I don't know, I think they've gone into some alliance now with some other airline.
That's correct.
So are we going to allow flights? You can look at what's happening in the UK. Are we going to say that the airlines coming in from the UK can also go in? So these are some of the things that, even in the US, the hubs that we do get flights into Nigeria, usually in New York, I think Atlanta, yes. I'm not sure whether they're sending direct flight from Houston, or I think Delta flies out of
Houston.
Delta flies out of one of those one of those hubs. But you see what is happening in Florida. You see what is happening in California. These were states that seemed lax in the first instance and didn't take the requisite precautions. So how do you underline that to say, look, yes, you are coming in, do your negative test before you come? So if I don't know, that's part of the clarity.
I think the simplest way to really handle this, I mean, mentally speaking, the simplest way to handle it is to, first of all, trust that the PTF is doing everything in the interest of Nigeria to protect Nigeria. And so even if the aviation department says, okay, we're happy with these individuals, they are allowing us to come in, and so it makes sense that we allow them to come in. But the medical side, the NCDC would say, no, we are worried about this and that, and therefore this won't happen. And that was why at the initial time I described it as very complex. The situation is quite complex. It's not a straitjacket thing, and we will never expect it to be a straitjacket thing, because they are working as a team. And I think in that team, the medical side appears to have an upper hand, because this postponement of resumption, that was supposed to take place tomorrow. And then pushed to the 5th, was not as a result of the aviation side not being ready. No, it was a medical, side that said a few things are still not clear, and a few things are still not in place. I want to be sure. And so that should answer your question, that we should really trust the individuals that are working for the nation to make sure we are all safe, and hope and believe that they will always do what is in the interest of the nation and what's the interest of the safety of Nigerians. However, some of us will continue to watch and look out. Anytime we think they are becoming a little careless or becoming a little reckless in the bid, we will always scream out. If nobody else will, trust me, I will always do it.
Do you think the sector is in a haste to resume flights? Because if you consider the caseload, the global caseload of the pandemic, I mean, it's very high. Though we're fortunate not to have high fatality rate and all that, but outside Europe and the Americas, it's quite high. So do you think we're in a haste to actually open our skies for international flights? Again, bearing in mind that at first the index case came from outside the country.
From outside the country. Yes. Again, that is the complexity in this whole thing. If you ask me, the airplane on its own would not cause infections. That is, people flying within the airplane, because I do know and understand the system and how it works in there. I've had people saying to me, a whole lot of people over the week called and said, God, we heard you saying that it's safe to fly, and you made description of the air conditioning system in the airplane. I said, yes, I hold my position in that. It's correct, because the fear is that we're not doing social distancing within the, I need to explain this so that we can understand this a little better, and our viewers will also understand. They fear that because there's no social distancing or physical distancing within the cabin of the airplane, that it's likely that some asymptomatic individual sitting next to you may sneeze, cough, or speak, and then these droplets come off and then come across to the next individual. And I say to you, for what I know about the system, is not likely to happen. Why is that? The air conditioning system in the airplane has a part of it that has to do with suction, and suction is simply a movement of either particles, liquid, or whatever, from a high pressure zone to a low pressure zone. Naturally, for instance, if you seal up this studio that we are in right now and then pressurize it, and so the studio is under pressure, that makes the outside of the studio of a lower pressure. Any particle or liquid or whatever that is existing in this place, once it finds any opening, leaves the space naturally, without any machine or any pump or anything, naturally. And that's why, for instance, because the cabin of an airplane is pressurized, because the creator of the world put the atmospheric pressure here on Earth to sustain our lungs. The reason you're able to do this is because of the atmospheric pressure existing here. Now, if you go up into the skies about 30,000 feet, the atmospheric pressure thins out. It's not as high as it's here. And if you go even further, it disappears completely. That's when you say you are in space, and you find that you're floating. You can't even stand on anything and walk anymore. You just float. And that's why when an airplane is in flight and there is either a broken window or a fall off of one of the emergency doors, you know what happens? If you're not strapped strongly with your seat belt, the pressure lifts you off your seat, hangs you in the air, even with your 70 or 80 kg weight. It lifts you, hangs you, and takes you all the way to that opening that depressurizes the cabin and sucks you out. That's what happens. So in that same fashion, those droplets that may come off somebody's, as soon as they get into the space, they leave, because they are provisions for suction.
Okay, yeah, got it. Well, thanks a lot. Very interesting, very interesting description there.
Yes.
Earlier we had indicated that we'll be joined for this conversation by the Director General of NCAA, that's the Civil Aviation Authority, Captain Musa Nuhu. We have him now with us via Zoom. Captain Musa Nuhu, delighted to have you with us on the program. But very quickly, we've touched on a number of issues. I wouldn't know whether you've had the opportunity of listening on some of the issues that we've raised with Godi Ike. Namely, the basis for the resumption of regular international flights, even on a limited scale. We understand the federal government says, like, this will be on the basis of reciprocity. You allow us fly into your country, we allow you fly into our country. What else governs this, or what else will govern this? Because I've raised the issue of health considerations. Assuming, and today we do not have direct connections between Nigeria and Brazil, we used to have. If Brazil allowed us to fly into Brazil, would we also allow Brazil to fly into Nigeria, considering the number of infections relating to COVID-19 in that country? Spain, heavily impacted. Italy, heavily impacted. On the African continent, South Africa has the highest caseload as well as leading the board in terms of fatalities. So what exactly is afoot in terms of the resumption of international flights 1 week hence?
Thank you very much, and good morning. Thank you for having me here, and my apologies for being late. There are some mix-up about the timing. Well, on the resumption of international, the issue of reciprocity, it's not the issue of ban my aircraft if I like. What some countries have done have banned the citizens of other countries from going to their country. So that's what we're going to do. If you don't allow the citizens of Nigeria to fly into your country, will not allow the citizens of your country to come to Nigeria. Some other countries have restrictions, like UK, you go there, I think you do a test, and you go into quarantine for 2 weeks. So different countries have different protocols for international flights. So we are looking at what other countries have done, and that's exactly what we do, especially those that do not allow the citizens or residents of Nigeria to go into that country. That's exactly what we are going to do. And on the issues of countries with a high prevalence of COVID-19, that's a decision, for the health authorities, but we have put measures in place to mitigate this possible carryover of this disease to Nigeria. And what we've done is you are required to do a COVID test between 48 and 72 hours before your arrival in Nigeria. Then 1 week later, you do a follow-up test in Nigeria to ensure that you are not showing any symptoms. But my understanding, I'm not a health expert, and please don't hold me to this. My understanding, the greater danger we have now is the community spread, but still, we have to be very careful when we open international airports to passengers, not to allow a serious inflow of sick people who are infected with coronavirus to come into our country, to already burden already an overburdened health system. That's the reason why this protocols have been put in place. It's not 100% perfect, but it captures, from my understanding, if you do the test before you depart and you do the test 1 week later, it captures about 94-95%. So even if you are going to miss, it's very little number. Nothing is 100%, but we'll put mitigating measures to kind of manage the situation.
What measure are we putting in place in terms of the readiness of the port health officials, to be able to detect any escape, when visitors arrive the country?
Before there's an online platform that's been developed. So before you even depart, you go to the online platform, you fill all your information, your health history, your travel history, your contact details, and any other necessary information as might be required by the health authorities. then you pay for the test you are going to do in Nigeria. The test you do 7 days after arrival in Nigeria. Then you will be printed, you have a receipt with a barcode. Then you need to do another test 48 to 72 hours, preferably before you depart to Nigeria. When you arrive in Nigeria, the whole idea of filling that form is you eliminate the physical filling, manual filling of forms you get into Nigeria, which creates a lot of crowd and agitation by passengers. So you take that out. So when you land, it goes straight through the Port Health authorities for the temperature check. They will ask you a few questions and observe you for symptoms of coronavirus. If anybody's suspected symptom is taken aside and moved on to the relevant department for further checks and possible quarantine if there's any confirmed symptom or case of coronavirus. But for those who go pass through the process, they go through the normal immigration customs, declare they leave the airport, then they are required to be in self-quarantine for 1 week. After 1 week, they go do a second test. I understand that the incubation period starts between 5 and 12 days, so you do an incubation test within that period. You do a COVID test, if to see any symptoms of corona. If you are negative, you go free. If you are positive, depending on the seriousness, you either go into isolation or you go into a treatment center. So I know a lot of people say, okay, are you sure people are going to come back and do the second test? What's going to happen? Your passport details is part of the information that you fill, and you'll be given a period of time to submit your second COVID test in 19. If you don't do that, there's a travel ban for a period and extended than the period that will put on your passport. So you can travel for an extensive time, which you believe will be an incentive enough for people to go do their second test in Nigeria. And this second test will only be accepted at accredited and certified labs in Nigeria by the NCDC and the Port Health authorities.
All right, Captain Woods, thank you very much. I mean, shall we say on paper, I'm not being cynical, on paper all of this sounds right, but we do know we had some issues about 6 months ago when, as some persons had indicated, we should have shut our borders. We allowed our borders open for some weeks, and all of a sudden we started seeing a rise in the numbers of infections. And here we are again seeking to reopen our borders. That's not land borders now, air travels, and the risk that is inherent in all of this. If you recall, as some persons were coming in from abroad, while we still had the window open before international flights were closed, some of the information that they provided was completely misleading. So how do we deal with instances, even with this advanced passenger information that you are referring to, that perhaps an individual might not just be recklessly careless as to the information he or she provides, and then we are relying on the same individuals to say, look, self-isolate for 7 days or undergo a test. A number of those persons about 6 months or so ago just disappeared into the community, which is why we started having community transmission of the coronavirus. Is this a distinct possibility? And if so, how are the authorities getting ready to combat this?
Well, an issue of health matters is an issue of collective responsibilities. You cannot expect government or policemen to be with each and every individual to make sure each and every individual goes into self-isolation. It is a matter of responsibility. We must take full responsibility for our health. You cannot expect imagine if you have 4,000 passengers come into Nigeria in a day. The system is just not feasible for 4,000 people to be monitored to ensure they go into isolation for 1 week. That's a system. I mean, we just have to take full responsibilities for our action, and anybody caught will be penalized. But I've been asked, why don't government put them in quarantine? If you put people in quarantine, you can, if you do the maths, it's billions and billions of naira. Government does not have the funds to put everybody in self-quarantine. Most countries require self-quarantine. The government cannot put in enforced quarantine. The resources are not just there. And the comfort we get is those who have done the COVID-19's pre-departure within the stipulated period. Statistics show it's about 5% or less that of those that come turn out positive during the second test in time. So the figure has been narrowed down. And if you do the second test within the 7 days of arrival in area, you further capture most of those people that 5% that might have gotten positive the second time around. So the measures are there to minimize. Yes, you don't want even one person with COVID-19 coming into the country, but there is no system in this entire world that's 100% positive. Every country you go, they have some percentage that slip through the system. But the important thing is the mitigating measures that are put in place, the pre-arrival COVID-19 within the stipulated period, which eliminates a significant part of those that might be infected. And the second one, to capture those that might have turned positive since their test before arriving in Nigeria.
Okay, Captain Nuhu, I just like to ask really, in whose interest is this resumption of international flights in the first place? Because as some people would say, at a time when we were having, less caseload, we shut down, total shutdown. Now that we seem to be having increase in, daily or weekly metric caseload, we are reopening our international flights.
So what was the question?
Whose interest really is this resumption of international flights?
Yes. Well, international flights, we have to find a way to resume international flights. We need the balance between the health well-being of the country and the economic well-being of the country. It's a balance that each and every country needs to find for itself. Every country does its own risk assessments and comes out with measures to try to balance it. No country can continue shut down in perpetuity until vaccine is found and the coronavirus is dealt with. We just have to find a way. You can't just close down, and that's why you put these measures in place to mitigate the risk. The risk assessment have been done by the health authorities, and they come out with measures which they believe through modeling, which they believe will eliminate most, if not all, the coronavirus infected people coming into the country. And by the way, the biggest problem we have right now is community transmission. And I'm sure if you go to a lot of our cities, I've been to cities where I wear face mask, and also I'm a stranger. Nobody wears his face mask. I think that's the biggest danger to us right now, is community transmission.
Captain Musa Nuhu, you've already explained the basis for the reciprocity. If I recast what you said, that countries that have indicated that they will not allow Nigerian citizens to fly into their own countries, citizens of such countries will also not be allowed to fly into our country. I'm just wondering, is citizen sufficient? I mean, if those countries took their decision on the basis of citizenship, is that sufficient? Couldn't we possibly have looked at, say, residency, to say where you reside? I mean, if assuming you are Spanish and you reside in Morocco, and Morocco has a lower caseload than Spain itself, and you want to fly Air Maroc to Lagos, would you be denied permission to land because you are Spanish?
Could you say that again? I didn't quite catch your question.
Okay, well, you got the preface to my question, that namely the basis for the planned reciprocity is citizenship. That is to say, if country A says that Nigerian citizens cannot and should not fly internationally into their own country, Nigeria would in turn say citizens of country A should also not fly into our country. And I'm wondering, I said, could we also have considered residency as a more critical factor in debarring any person from getting to our country on account of the high prevalence rate of coronavirus in the place where such a person resides, rather than his nationality simpliciter?
Okay, resident, usually it's when they say we ban the citizens of a country, the residents are not included. A lot of European that allow citizens that when they say citizens of country A and residents in our own country, usually allow the official residents in your own country back to that country. Residents are not usually included in this travel ban. So residents are allowed to return to their places of residence, even if they are not citizens of that country. And now one of the issues you mentioned, there unfortunately quite a few number of countries, especially in Europe, that have food ban on Nigeria. They have their cases of coronavirus is much higher than that of Nigeria. So on the health cases, it doesn't make any sense why you will ban the citizens of our country when you are more likely to catch coronavirus when I go to your country rather than you coming to Nigeria. So it just doesn't add up.
All right, thank you very much, Captain Musa Nuhu. Go to UK just before we wrap this up, and then also take a look at the twists that have come. You've listened to the explanations provided by the Director General of the NCCA. What more would you like to add?
Oh, well, I already told you from inception that the situation is quite complex, tricky, and difficult to deal with. He pointed out about the balance with the economy and the health of the nation. That we need to strike a balance. If you recall, I mentioned that already. That nations would weigh which one benefits them more at every point in time in making that decision. And so I do not see how else we're going to be able to deal with this except to say shut our borders, relate with no one, and hold up in here. And the question is, if we make that choice, are we going to survive as a nation? Are we going to survive as a people? Are we, what's the word I'm looking for now?
Self-sufficient?
Self-sufficient, that's the word. Are we now self-sufficient enough to say to all the people who are promoting this ugly virus, so please stay there, we don't want you, and please don't expect us because we're not coming? Can we really say that? And if the answer is no, then we do what is the best we can under the circumstance we find ourselves. It's quite complex, very tricky, very difficult.
I don't know.
Very difficult.
But let's listen to the tweets that we have.
Okay.
Dele Jack Solomon says, getting it right on the resumption of international flights of the Nigerian aviation sector is very sacrosanct towards control of the spread of the pandemic. Now, no doubt emphasis should be placed on the observation of all the safety and technical guidelines as prescribed by global and health authorities. Nothing more, nothing less.
Chris Simeon says the aviation ministry must ensure that passengers from foreign countries that come in are well screened, and they should comply with the laid down rules and guidelines.
P.O. Yebanji, this is a case of sadness and joy. Joy for returning of normalcy, sad for fear of unknown. The attention of the nation should be on the Port Health Authority, immigration officers, and the custom, among others. We cannot afford their failure this time around. May God help Nigeria.
Comrade Alhaji Ngala, resumption of international flights is a welcome development as it will boost the economy.
All right, I think
Jones Ferrari,
those are the ones.
Jones Ferrari is saying that I don't agree with the reopening of of resumption of flights, you don't reopen flights, with the resumption of flights, with lockdown everywhere when we had less cases, and we are reopening when cases are high.
Okay, Festus Akiboyewa says, when flights eventually resume, Nigerians should only travel abroad when it's essential to do so, and FG must not hesitate to bring national control measures at short notice to minimize the risks to Nigerians.
That's a very valid point there. Eno Ayuk Edwin, opening up international airspace is essentially critical to reviving the economy and preventing job losses. However, tighter COVID-19 protocols must be in place and not compromised to serve individuals or otherwise. Okay, so those are the tweets that we can accommodate in the meantime. As we indicated, we have the second topic for conversation. Here with us in the Abuja studios, we would like to appreciate aviation analyst Godike. Godike, thank you very much there for your contributions to our discussion this morning.
Thank you, Ken.
Via Zoom,
thank you, sir.
Via Zoom, we were joined by the Director General of the NCAA, that's the Civil Aviation Authority, Captain Musa Nuhu. DJ, our delight having you on the program this morning.
Thank you very much. As Mr. Godi said, it's a very, very complex situation. There is no simple solution to it, and what has been done is going to be continuously reviewed. I want to make it clear to the traveling part, it's a partial resumption. We're not opening airports fully to everybody. It's a control opening so that we can control the system, have things in control, and as things review, we might increase or decrease depending on it's a continuous process that we review. We're not just going and that's it. The situation is going to be monitored. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you very much, and best wishes as you reopen the airspace partially for regular international flights. That's just in about a week. All right, it's Good Morning Nigeria live on NTS Network Service. We're taking a short break now. When we return, we'll be dealing with the peace pact signed in troubled southern Kaduna.
A new edition of TV Guide is out, featuring great personalities from all walks of life. Expository interview with a young TV presenter who shows passion on what she does, Morayo Afolabi Brown of TVC. Pick a copy of this compendium of mind-blowing stories and get abreast with issues as regards media convergence, leadership, health, star profiles, star programs, fashion, sports, human angle stories, and lots more. Meet some media professionals within our space who have paid their dues in no small ways. TV Guide, very incisive, very educative and compelling. Grab a copy at the vendor near you or NTA stations nationwide. TV Guide, your indispensable companion.
As a strong immune system increases the chances of victims surviving COVID-19, a corruption-free society creates opportunities for citizens to thrive and prosper. Build your immunity. Stop corruption now. Report all acts of corruption